China's economic growth over the past decades has relied on cheap coal, and the world has enjoyed the products China makes using coal. Now, in the middle of a global rush to become green, the least loved commodity has rolled back and is not going away. Hi, welcome to my show. I'm Lei. Coal has played an indispensable role in China's industrialization. Paramount leader Deng Xiaoping was the mastermind behind China's economic reform. The first lesson he learned during the early days of the reform was the importance of energy. In October 1978, Deng Xiaoping visited Japan. When he toured Nippon Steel, he asked its chairman, Yoshihiro Inayama, about the cost per ton of steel the Japanese plant produced. Inayama quoted a figure. Deng Xiaoping thought the number was reasonable. After returning to China, he gave the go-ahead to import the same steel plant from Japan. China's annual revenue at the time was 77 billion yuan, and just phase one of the Japanese steel plant cost the Chinese government a quarter of that, about 20 billion. When the plant was built in Shanghai a few years later, the Chinese discovered that the steel plant would consume half of the city's electricity. Half of Shanghai had to be blacked out in order to run the steel plant. As a result, the plant was not put into operation right away. Years later, Inayama mentioned it in his memoir. I was not lying to Mr. Deng Xiaoping. The cost of steel production in Japan was indeed the figure I quoted. But what I had not thought of was, China didn't have a large power supply. In order to run the steel plant, they had to import a power plant from Japan. With the cost of the power plant, their production cost per ton of steel was higher than imported steel. Within 40 years, China has grown to be the second largest economy in the world and assumes the title of the world's factory. It couldn't have achieved this without an abundant source of cheap energy. China is rich in coal. 70% of China's energy comes from coal. In 2020, China produced over 3.9 billion tons of coal, over 50% of total global production. A lot of media reports focus on China's coal imports, but it has accounted for less than 10% of China's coal consumption. Over 90% of the coal China consumes is domestically mined. In recent years, China has increased investments in coal mining. In October 2020, Carbon Brief, a British nonprofit, analyzed the major project lists in China's major energy-consuming and producing provinces. It found that of the estimated 6.2 trillion yuan or $1 trillion Chinese investments in energy and transportation sectors, low-carbon projects amounted to less than 10%. The remaining 90% went to high-carbon projects. The Global Energy Monitor 2021 report, released in April, shows a sharp increase in coal-fired power plants in China in 2020. The world reduced 37.8 gigawatt of coal-fired electricity last year, led by the United States and the EU. But China built 38.4 gigawatt of new coal-fired power plants last year, resulting in the first increase in global coal capacity since 2015. Coal has played a crucial role in China as it did during Britain's Industrial Revolution. Britain's rise to world power coincided with the rise of its coal production. By 1800, Britain produced more coal than the rest of the world combined. In 100 years, Britain's coal production grew 16-fold, from 6 million tons in 1770 to 100 million tons in 1870. Coal-burning locomotives and coal gas streetlights were both inventions during that period. Like Britain, America's rise to dominance was also synchronized with its major energy sources. The United States rose to global power after the Spanish-American War in 1898. 2 years later, in 1900, U.S. coal production reached 245 million tons, surpassing Britain as the world's largest coal producer. At the same time, the U.S. oil industry began to grow. By 1940, the U.S. produced nearly 70% of the world's oil at 191 million tons. However, crude oil production in the United States began to decline in the 1970s, and it sank to the lowest level in 2008, when its daily oil production was at the same level as that of 1947. As the United States relied on imported oil, it had to send troops around the world to ensure the stability of the oil-rich nations, as well as the transportation routes of oil imports. This made the fully loaded cost of oil in America high, and high energy cost is one of the main reasons for the United States to continuously outsource manufacturing jobs in the past decades. Beijing understands that for its goods to remain competitive, so as for China to keep the world's factory status, it must keep energy costs low. China is rich in coal but poor in oil and gas. According to data from a Chinese geology site, Earth Knowledge, when compared with the global average, China's per capita recoverable oil reserves are 92% less than the world average. Natural gas reserves per capita are 83% less. China's oil and gas reserves are insufficient to support its industrial activities. Compared to the 2.6 tons per capita oil reserves, China's 193 tons per capita coal reserves are much higher. Therefore, Chinese scholars have concluded our country cannot survive without coal. In terms of calorific value, the price of electric coal is low compared with the prices of oil and gas. If electricity is generated by oil and gas to support China's industrial activities, with energy cost accounting for about 40% of the cost of goods, prices will go up more dramatically than we can imagine. Today, China produces 63% of shoes, 70% of mobile phones, 75% of solar panels, 80% of air conditioners, 90% of computers. China produces more than half of the world's steel. It also makes 30% of the world's active pharmaceutical ingredients. If China abandons coal, the prices of these products will rise sharply, and we will all feel the impact. Therefore, no matter how global politicians and environmentalists talk about carbon neutrality, zero emissions, and no matter how the Chinese leaders make promises, coal will remain the backbone of the Chinese economy for a long time. Because of China's demand for coal as well as rising oil and gas prices, coal today is the king of commodities and is in high demand. Coal stocks are rising. European coal futures have more than doubled since the start of the year. As long as the world depends on China for producing shoes, mobile phones, computers, and even solar panels, coal will be a hot commodity. In America, coal mines are offering six-digit salaries to hire miners. According to Forbes, coal-fired power generation will increase 22% in the United States in 2021, the first annual increase since 2014. As politicians in Washington are canceling more oil and gas pipelines, who knows? Americans may one day end up burning coal to stay warm. After all, the United States has the world's largest coal reserves. Well, that's all for today. I made a video that explains the demand side increase in the Chinese energy market called Why China Cut Power. You can check it out. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.